My name is Maureen, and for almost 8 years, I believed I was married to a man I understood. Not perfect, no one is, but predictable in the way long marriages become. The kind where you can tell your spouse's mood just by how they shut the door. What I didn't know was that one afternoon, so ordinary it almost feels insulting to call it a turning point, would quietly split my life into before and after with something so small, so almost laughable, that it took me weeks to understand the damage had already been done. It started with a phone. Leo's phone. The kids were home from school, their backpacks dumped in the hallway like always, laughter bouncing off the walls in that reckless, joyful way children have when they feel safe. I was in the kitchen, half listening, half planning dinner, when I heard the sharp sound of something hitting the floor. Then silence. The kind of silence parents recognize instantly, the "we messed up" kind. Moments later, our youngest stood at the doorway, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Mom." Daddy's phone screen cracked. I remember thinking, okay. That's annoying, but manageable. Screens can be replaced. Accidents happen. Leo was home, yes, but he'd been stressed lately. Work. Bills. Life. I prepared myself to mediate, to soften the edges like I often did. What I wasn't prepared for was the man who walked into the living room. Leo didn't yell at first. That almost made it worse. His jaw tightened, his eyes hardened, and then he said something that felt strangely ceremonial, like a sentence being passed in a courtroom. "No television. Not today. Not tomorrow. Until I say so." The kids froze. I froze. It felt excessive, but I told myself, let him cool down. Parents discipline differently. I planned to talk to him later, privately, when emotions had settled. But Leo didn't stay. He grabbed his keys and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the walls seemed to flinch. That was the first crack. Not the phone screen. The silence he left behind. When he came back later that night, he didn't speak to me. Or the kids. He moved through the house like we were furniture he no longer recognized. The children stayed in their room, whispering, afraid to ask for water, afraid to breathe too loudly. I told myself it would pass. I always did. But it didn't. Days turned into weeks, and Leo's anger didn't cool, it calcified. He carried it like armor. He snapped at questions. Ignored greetings. Ate without us or not at all. And the strangest part? I hadn't done anything. I was in the kitchen when the phone broke. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend the kids too strongly. I simply existed. Then came one evening. I was in the living room, watching the news. Not cartoons. Not a movie. The news. As a broadcaster, staying informed wasn't a hobby, it was my job. I was flipping between channels, comparing coverage, mentally taking notes. The kids sat quietly beside me, unusually still, like guests in their own home. Leo walked in, glanced at the screen, and asked, "Why is the TV on?" I laughed at first. I thought he was joking. When I explained, calmly, he exploded. "Didn't I hear we were banned from watching television? All of us. Including me." I asked him if he was serious. If I was now being punished too. If I was a child. If I had broken anything. His answer came like a hammer. It was his house, and if the children were being punished, I would be punished with them, because their mistake was my fault. That was the moment something inside me snapped. When he said the children were no longer his responsibility, I felt the air leave my lungs. When he blamed me for their behavior, as if parenting was a solo act I'd failed, I knew this wasn't about a phone anymore. This was about control. About something deeper he wasn't saying. I took the kids by the hand and left the room while they shook beside me. Behind us, Leo locked the bedroom door. That sound, the click of the lock, echoed in my chest long after the house went quiet. That night, lying awake with my children curled against me, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't arguing with my husband. I was living with a stranger. After that first confrontation, the house felt empty in a way I never imagined possible. Not because Leo was gone, he was home, but because his presence had become a wall between us. Every room carried the weight of his unspoken anger. Every glance from him was heavy, distant, as if we had become invisible objects rather than a family he cared for. The children, still young enough to cling to innocence but old enough to sense danger, began avoiding him. They tiptoed past his chair, whispered in corners, and slept with lights on, pretending to read while their hearts thumped in fear. Each small sound, dropping a spoon, closing a door, made them flinch. It broke me, watching the people I loved most shrink in their own home. And yet, I had been silent too. For weeks, I have tried speaking him out of his anger, and tried to wait it out, hoping he would come around, hoping this storm was temporary. But the storm didn't pass. It intensified. One evening, I was preparing dinner when I heard the faint click of the front door. Leo had returned from work, but instead of the usual greetings, he entered like a shadow, eyes scanning the room, calculating, cold. I kept stirring the pot, trying to make myself invisible. The kids froze on the couch, holding their books like shields. "Why is the TV on?" he barked. It was the same question he had asked days earlier, but this time, it carried the weight of accusation. I explained calmly, as I always did, that I was watching the news. That it wasn't a cartoon or entertainment, but something necessary for my work. He didn't care. He repeated his decree, the ban applied to everyone. I asked him again if that included me. "Yes," he said. "Why?" "Because it's my house," he roared. I paused. My hands shook, my voice caught, but I demanded, "Am I a child? Did I break anything? Why am I punished for the mistakes of children?" He didn't answer in words. Instead, he launched into a tirade, blaming me for the children's behavior. According to him, I had failed to train them properly, and now the consequences were mine to bear. The kids stared at me, eyes wide, confused and terrified. That night, I realized Leo had changed. Or perhaps, I had been blind to the person he had always been, waiting to reveal himself. Weeks turned into months, and the pattern became predictable: silent meals, long absences, unexplained departures, and a constant tension that wrapped itself around every corner of our home. The children stopped asking for help with homework. They stopped laughing in the living room. They stopped looking at Leo with the same trust they once had. And me? I kept quiet too. For months, I convinced myself that the man I married would return. But the truth was obvious: he wasn't coming back. Not the same Leo the first knew. The breaking point came unexpectedly. One afternoon, after yet another long day of pretending the house was normal, I found myself on the floor of the living room, the kids asleep in their room, and I realized I had been holding my breath for a year. A year of tension, silence, and fear. I felt tears streak down my face, not just for the children, but for myself. I asked myself, how did we end up here? How did someone so close become so distant, so unrecognizable? It was then I made a choice. I couldn't allow this environment to define the childhood of my children. I couldn't let fear shape their hearts or make them shrink in their own home. I couldn't let silence and aggression dictate what they believed love and family should look like. I began looking for a small apartment, just enough space for the children and me. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they could laugh again without flinching. Somewhere I could breathe. The moment I signed the lease, something inside me shifted. It wasn't relief, it was clarity. The man I had married wasn't the one standing in our living room anymore. The man who could punish children for accidents, punish their mother for the same accidents, and refuse accountability, that man was gone, or perhaps he had always been there, hidden beneath the facade I trusted. When I finally moved, the change in the children was immediate. They laughed again, small, uncertain at first, but it was real. They hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thank you, Mommy." Their gratitude was heartbreaking and beautiful, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel hope. Hope that life didn't have to be dictated by fear. And hope that even though the man I married had shown me a side I never wanted to see, we could still find peace, on our own terms. The first few weeks in the apartment were almost surreal. For the first time in over a year, the children and I could move freely, laugh without hesitation, and eat dinner without fear. The walls echoed with their giggles instead of tension. And yet, even amidst this fragile peace, I couldn't ignore the storm that still loomed, Leo. At first, there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no attempts to contact us beyond the occasional passive-aggressive message. I told myself it was a blessing, but deep down, I knew this silence wasn't calm, it was a precursor. And sure enough, one chilly evening, as I prepared the children for bed, my phone buzzed. His name flashed across the screen, Leo. My chest tightened, but I didn't hesitate to answer. "Where are you?" His voice was sharp, controlled, like a predator circling its prey. "I'm home, with the kids," I said calmly, refusing to let fear control me. "We're fine here. They're safe. And I won't be returning just because you demand it." There was a pause. Then, almost quietly, "I want to see them." I had expected that. I expected attempts to assert control, to undermine me, to make the children doubt the sanctuary we had found. But I didn't expect the subtle undertone, a hint of something unfamiliar, perhaps guilt, perhaps reflection. Still, I stood my ground. "You can visit them," I said, "but under my terms. This is their home as much as mine now. No yelling. No threats. No punishment. Do you understand?" There was silence again. And then, an almost inaudible, "Fine." The visit was arranged for the following afternoon. The children, excited but wary, dressed carefully, and I briefed them on what to expect. "Stay calm. Speak honestly. Remember, we are safe. Nothing he says changes that." They nodded, trying to appear brave, and I could see the fear lingering behind their eyes. When Leo arrived, he was different. Not apologetic, but controlled. There was a stiffness in his posture, like a man walking on ice, careful not to fall. He greeted the children, a faint smile flickering for a brief second, and then turned to me. "Maureen," he said. "I'm glad you're here," I replied evenly. "Let's talk." We sat in the living room, the children nearby but pretending to read, giving us space. And then it started. The confrontation I had long anticipated, the one I had tried to prepare for, but no one can truly prepare for someone you thought you knew unraveling in front of you. "Why did you leave?" Leo's voice was low, steady, but I could sense the storm beneath. "Because you made it impossible to live as a family," I said. "You punished the children for accidents. You punished me. You abdicated responsibility." And the silence, Leo, the silence was deafening. I couldn't stand it anymore. His eyes narrowed, a flash of hurt crossing his features. "You think I was wrong?" "I don't think, Leo." "I know," I said firmly. "You allowed anger to dictate your actions, and it hurt all of us. The children still carry the fear of you in their hearts. And I refuse to let that continue." A tense quiet followed. He stared at the floor, and for the first time in years, I saw uncertainty in his eyes. The man who had been rigid, unyielding, and terrifying now looked small. Vulnerable in a way that unsettled me. Then he said something that surprised me. I didn't know it affected you all this way. I thought it was discipline." I swallowed hard, restraining the emotions rising in me. Discipline is guidance, Leo. Discipline is teaching responsibility, not instilling fear. You've crossed a line you didn't see, and it's not too late to fix it. But it requires accountability. And I won't sweep this under the rug. For the next 2 hours, we talked, or rather, I talked, and he listened. Slowly, haltingly, he began to acknowledge things I had longed for him to see, the children's fear, my exhaustion, the broken trust. There were no apologies yet. There was no sudden transformation. But there was a crack, a small one, in the armor he had built over years. By the time the visit ended, the children hugged me tightly, whispering, "We're glad you didn't go back." Leo watched them, silent, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I glimpsed the father I had once known. That night, I lay awake, reflecting on the day. I realized that confrontation wasn't about anger. It was about reclaiming our lives, setting boundaries, and showing the children that they were worthy of respect and safety. I had drawn a line, and I had been brave enough to stand behind it. The morning after Leo's visit, the apartment felt lighter, but not entirely safe. The children woke up smiling, laughter spilling from the bedrooms as they played freely without the shadow of fear looming over them. I watched them from the kitchen doorway, coffee in hand, feeling a mix of relief and lingering unease. Leo had listened, acknowledged some things, but there were gaps, secrets in his silence, that I couldn't ignore. I decided that day I needed clarity, not just about his actions, but about who Leo really was now. 8 years of marriage, almost a decade of shared life, and yet a single broken phone had exposed a side of him I didn't recognize. Was this man, the one I had loved, trusted, and built a home with, someone I truly knew? Or was he a stranger living in my past, using familiarity as camouflage? I called one of my oldest friends, Maya, who had been through her own share of complicated marriages. Her voice was calm but firm. "Maureen, boundaries aren't just for your husband, they're for you and the children too. Don't wait for Leo to change. Take control of what you can." I nodded as I sipped my coffee. Her words were like a lifeline, direct, uncompromising, but freeing. By late afternoon, I had a plan. The children would continue to attend their regular classes, have meals on schedule, and maintain their routines. Leo would be allowed visits, but only when I could supervise. And for the first time in a long while, I began documenting everything: his absences, the tense interactions, the phone calls, the threats. I needed evidence, if nothing else, to protect the children from further psychological harm. The next time Leo showed up, the change in protocol hit him immediately. I greeted him at the door, calm but firm. "Leo, you can see the children, but only in the living room. And we will not revisit last year's incidents. Any shouting or punishing will end your visits immediately." He hesitated at the threshold, visibly frustrated but compliant. His eyes lingered on the children, who were playing with toys on the rug, oblivious to the tension. For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something human in him, regret, perhaps, or the remnants of a father who had forgotten how to be present. But as the hour went on, Leo's frustration became palpable. He asked questions I couldn't answer about his absence, where he had been, and why he had stayed away. I repeated the truth: "I don't know where you've been. But I do know what our children need: consistency, love, and stability. And if you cannot provide that, then they are better off without your presence in the moment." Leo's silence was deafening. It wasn't denial, it wasn't argument, it was a wall, thick and unyielding. And behind that wall, I suspected secrets. Small inconsistencies in his stories, subtle glances that didn't match his words. Something had changed him, or perhaps revealed him, and I needed to uncover the truth before it could hurt us further. That night, after the children were asleep, I scoured his social media profiles, financial activity, and even mutual friends' accounts. The picture was incomplete, but troubling. There were gaps, week-long absences he couldn't explain, unexplained transactions, cryptic messages. The man I had trusted implicitly seemed to be living a double life, one that he had carefully shielded from me. I realized then that protecting my children, and myself, required more than courage. It required strategy, vigilance, and, above all, clarity. I couldn't allow fear to dictate my actions anymore, and I couldn't allow Leo's silence to dictate our family's future. Over the next few days, I spoke openly with the children about boundaries, about respect, and about their feelings. I reassured them that they were safe, that mistakes didn't define them, and that anger from adults, no matter how intimidating, did not diminish their worth. Their relief was palpable, their laughter returned, echoing in the apartment like a balm to the months of fear and tension. One evening, as I watched them sleeping peacefully, I made a silent vow: whatever secrets Leo was hiding, whatever past mistakes or unexplained absences, I would face them head-on. I would not allow our children to grow up under the shadow of his unpredictability or fear. I would not allow myself to be silenced or diminished. It wasn't long before he called, just to check in. The conversation was careful, calm. He asked about the children's schoolwork, their routines, their moods. He didn't ask about the apartment, or about me, or push for emotional closeness too soon. I realized in that moment how different it was from the chaos we had lived with before, how different he was trying to be. A few days later, he showed up again. This time, he came prepared: snacks the kids liked, a small bouquet of flowers for me, and a folder with documents and plans. He wanted to help with the children's extracurricular registrations, school forms, and even suggested a new weekend routine. I studied him quietly from the couch, arms crossed. Was this genuine effort, or a show? "Maureen, I know I can't undo the past," he said softly, "but I want to be here for them. For you. I want to rebuild what I've broken." I took a deep breath. "Leo, words aren't enough. Your actions have to prove it. And no shortcuts." For the next hour, he worked with the children patiently. Nathan needed help with a science project, Ella with her reading. Leo listened, guided, encouraged. He didn't raise his voice once. He even laughed when Ella pronounced a word wrong, gently correcting her. I could feel my skepticism soften, not entirely, but enough to notice the effort. After the children went to their rooms, Leo and I sat across from each other. The tension was palpable, unspoken words hanging between us. "Maureen, I know I hurt you," he said, eyes sincere. "And I know I hurt them too. I want to fix it, but I need your help. I need you to tell me when I'm crossing the line." I stared at him. Could I? Could I allow myself to open that door again? My heart said yes, my mind screamed caution. "Leo, I'll hold you accountable," I said finally. "And I expect consistency. If you falter, even once, I won't hesitate to protect my children. That's non-negotiable." He nodded solemnly. "I understand." Over the next few weeks, this became our rhythm. He showed up for appointments, school events, and even the simplest things, helping Nathan with math homework, taking Ella to the park, asking the kids what they wanted for dinner. Every time he proved himself, it chipped away at the fear the children had carried for so long. But trust isn't rebuilt without tests, and life has a way of putting sincerity to the ultimate challenge. One evening, Leo arrived later than expected. I was tense. The children were asleep, and I worried. Was he really committed, or was this a slip back into old patterns? When he walked in, rain dripping from his coat, I expected anger, tension, anything. Instead, he quietly knelt on the floor and whispered to me, "I know I'm late. I should have called. I will make it right tomorrow, and I promise I'll never do it again." The raw honesty stunned me. I realized in that moment that he was learning accountability, something he had never done before. I allowed myself to believe, cautiously, that change was possible. As the nights passed, our interactions remained careful but warm. Leo learned the children's routines, their favorite foods, even their fears. He asked for feedback from me, how to be better, how to handle situations that had once triggered his anger. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And in a home where laughter had been scarce, the children's giggles began to fill the spaces again. One Sunday, as we sat around the breakfast table, Leo turned to the kids and said, "I know I've failed before. But I want you both to know I love you, and I'll do my best to show it every day." Nathan looked at him, hesitated, then nodded. Ella smiled, a little shy, but genuine. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Trust isn't rebuilt in a day, a week, or even a month. It's rebuilt moment by moment, action by action. Leo had begun his journey, not as the man who once controlled through fear, but as a father and husband willing to earn his place in our lives. As I watched him with my children, I allowed myself a small, cautious hope. The apartment no longer felt like a temporary refuge. It felt like the beginning of a life where fear and anger could slowly be replaced by patience, understanding, and real connection. Then came the true test. One afternoon, Nathan accidentally spilled juice on Leo's laptop. My heart sank. In the past, this would have sparked a violent outburst, shouts, and punishment. But Leo just took a deep breath, calmly cleaned the mess, and said, "It's okay, accidents happen. Let's fix it together." I watched Nathan's eyes light up with relief, and a wave of hope filled me. That evening, after the children were asleep, Leo turned to me. "Maureen, I know trust isn't rebuilt in a week. But today, I felt like I finally passed a small test, not just for you, but for them. I want more days like this, more weeks, more months. I want to be the man, the father, the husband you all deserve." I let out a long breath. For the first time in over a year, I felt a sense of peace. The man sitting across from me wasn't perfect, but he was willing to earn back the love and trust he had broken. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about choosing to give someone a chance to change while protecting yourself and your children. Leo leaned forward and took my hand. "I know it's a long road. But I promise, every step I take with honesty and care." I looked into his eyes and saw sincerity, finally. The fear and frustration that had haunted our home for years were beginning to lift, replaced by cautious optimism and hope. Over the next few months, our lives slowly transformed. Leo continued to show up, not just in grand gestures, but in the small, consistent ways that truly mattered. We started family movie nights, simple walks in the park, and quiet evenings where conversation replaced tension. The children laughed freely, shared their thoughts without fear, and even started inviting him to their little games and stories. One rainy evening, as we sat on the couch together, Leo pulled me close. "Maureen, thank you for not giving up. Thank you for protecting them and me, even when it was hard." I smiled softly. "Leo, the hard part wasn't just yours to bear. But I needed to know you could truly change." He nodded, pressing his forehead against mine. "I have. And I will continue to every day. No excuses. No shortcuts." And in that moment, I realized that the family we had once lost to anger and fear was finally coming back, not exactly as it was, but stronger, more resilient, and grounded in trust and love. We had survived the worst, and now, we were choosing a new path together. I held his hand and whispered, "This is the life we've fought for, and we will protect it together." The rain tapped gently against the window, a soft reminder that storms can pass, and when they do, they leave space for growth, healing, and hope. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it, our family could be whole again. If you've listened to this story until now, then you already know this truth. Love alone is never enough. I learned that protecting your children sometimes means walking away before things break completely. It means choosing peace over pride, safety over silence, and growth over comfort. I learned that people can change, but only when they decide to, not when they are begged, threatened, or forgiven too quickly. This isn't a story about a perfect ending. It's a story about accountability. It's about boundaries. It's about what happens when a woman finally chooses herself and her children, and gives a man the space to either rise or fall on his own. If you are watching this and you see yourself in my story, know this. You are not weak for leaving, and you are not foolish for hoping. You are strong for surviving, and wise for setting limits. Healing doesn't always look like walking away forever. Sometimes, it looks like standing still, and watching who is willing to meet you there with real change. Thank you for listening to my truth. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because some stories don't just entertain us. They remind us that we are not alone. And do not forget to hit the like and subscribe button for more true life stories.